A very good morning to all of you. Thank you for being with me for all these days. And it is time we resume our progression of our syllabus. Today, we are going to discuss Chinua Achebe, a very famous South African writer's very famous poem, Refugee Mother and Child. Now, Achebe is a very, very, very popular South African writer known for his work on post-colonialism. Now, his upbringing in southeastern Nigeria and his childhood gave him a first-hand experience into the world of colonialism that was fueled into his novel, Things Fall Apart. Now, Things Fall Apart is Chinua's most phenomenal work that not only granted him a celebrity status around the world because it has been translated into uh, 45 different languages, but also because colonialism is something that impacted almost half of the globe, rather more. And this particular novel, Things Fall Apart, is a standing testimony to what colonialism did to many countries like these and ours. And I hope as people who've been recently independent out of a colonial rule will be able to understand that better. So not only is it his most popular work in Africa, it is a very popular text around the world. But we're not discussing Chinua Achebe as a novelist. Here we are to celebrate him as a poet for his one particular poem also gave him a celebrity status. Rather, I would say also gave him the humanist poet status around the world, and that is Refugee Mother and Child. Now, what is the historical background of this particular poem that made him write this? Now, Achebe was born to the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria in 1930, putting him in Nigeria at the exact right time for British colonialism to begin dictating the lives of the Igbo in the form of Royal Niger Company. The way they came to India as East India Company, they set their foot in this part of Africa as the Royal Niger Company. So a number of events that took place during this colonial education were later recorded in his works. There are a number of parallels, for instance, between things that the child observed and that the events that they're taking place that are actually recorded in his novel, Things Fall Apart and No Longer at Ease. So Achebe's style is to write about what he sees around him. And that gives the strength to his language. You will see it coming across in Refugee Mother and Child. So this particular poem was written during the Nigerian Civil War, an unfortunate aftermath of the colonialism that had influenced that area. During this time, Achebe mostly wrote poetry, finding it an easier task to manage during the intense period of war. It is difficult to imagine it, a young Chinua Achebe walking around his hometown, breathing in foul air, watching the hearts of mothers harden towards their children. Now, colonialism, poverty, and war. You have to understand a refugee camp here, right? Hundreds and thousands of families displaced, children being washed away by malnutrition and disease, mothers completely helpless, for they cannot offer anything to their children but love. So all this poverty and war took immense tolls on Nigerian people, and they were suffering badly. Now, Achebe's poem here serves as a written analysis of that particular time period, a reflection based on what he saw, and drew strength from the imagery and language by painting a picture of words for the reader, one that brings the suffering alive. Now, a significant part of the strength of this poem is the realization of how real it is. When you can easily bring it to a parallel with today's times, when you see hundreds of bodies being floated across rivers because they're not takers for the body. People are lined up outside hospitals. There are no beds. So misery is around us. And that almost a similar scenario was offered to Chinua, and he could pen it down. So there is this metaphor, there's this distant imagery which is grounded in reality. It almost comes as a shock because the poet is talking about diuretic odors, dying children with such blunt language. Now, in 1967, the Common War broke out in Nigeria when the Catholic ruled region of Biafra endeavored autonomy from the Muslim overwhelmed focal state. Amid those pivotal years, Achebe filled in as a minister for the Biafran government. So the war went severely for the Biafrans, who endured hugely, and starvation was overflowing. The writer's first-hand involvement in that hardship and the battle propelled him to write this particular poem on displaced mother and her children. Now, the title of the poem, Refugee Mother and Child, and the way he begins by saying that no Madonna and child could touch that picture. Now, if you could look at these pictures, here is Madonna and her child. Now, every great poet or every great painter after the 11th century, and even prior to that, has always painted Mother Mary and her baby Jesus in the most fond way possible. Madonna and child. That's how the Renaissance painters puts it. All the Renaissance painters painted something out of the Bible or the history or the human history associated around the Bible. And this particular scene, Mother Mary or Madonna, to say, holding her child, has been tried and imprinted by almost all poets. When you talk about mother and child in the Indian context, a little young Krishna with Yashoda comes to your mind. And I'm sure the third picture is the most compelling picture here, because this is a refugee mother with her child. Three different mothers, three different contexts, three different children. And each time the context varies, the imagery of the mother and the child differs and brings us more closer to reality. Now, Refugee Mother and Child is a poem that depicts the destitution and starvation for displaced people. The poem is about displaced mothers and their children who endure in the arms of neediness. In the long run, the child perishes and the mother feels despondency, upset, and vulnerable. In this poem, Achebe has joined love, lament, religion, confidence, enduring, recollections, agony, and change into the lives of the refugees. Look at the mothers here. Each one is holding on to his child strongly. The first two mothers have an absolutely different scenario because they know what they're holding is the savior to the world. But the third one knows that the child in her hand is going to wither away. The poet draws our attention to a particular model of a mother and child, that is Madonna and infant Jesus in her arms. Now, Madonna loves her child because, as I said, she knows that he's going to be the savior of mankind, right? Another example is the Indian parallel. Yashoda, though at that point of time she did not know what her young child is going to do, keep the entire universe in his mouth. But every time you look at the picture, right, you do not see death, rather you see life. Whereas the third mother, the refugee mother, knows that her child is dying slowly and there is no use taking care of him. There are other mothers in the camp who know the truth and they've already stopped caring for their dying children. They don't want to waste their time and energy and love on dying children. It is futile for them. Right? So they have become passive. But this particular mother that the poet is trying to describe is the epitome of motherhood. She loves her child. Her love for him is infinite and divine. She does not want anything in return for her love and sacrifice. She combs his dirty hair on the skull that is remaining of his head. She carefully parts her hair as if she's preparing him for school on any other regular day. She's doing a lot of work, including kissing the child, putting flowers as if offering the wreath on his coffin. And the poet uses all kinds of metaphors to bring in the horror of the situation, like ghost and rust, but still the mother keeps smiling. Now, even Mother Mary knew that her son is going to be nailed to the cross for the benefit of humanity, but she never left her poor son because probably his achievement was some reconciliation. Now, this particular child's death will not matter to the world. Yet, this mother's maternal love surpasses even the love of Madonna for her infant Jesus. This refugee's mother sacrifice and maternal love for her poor sick child cannot be explained, but Chinua has upheld the dignity of motherhood by writing this poem and touching our hearts with great compassion and love. Now, let me read the poem for you. No Madonna and child could touch that picture of a mother's tenderness for a son she soon would have to forget. The air was heavy with odors of diarrhea of unwashed children with washed out ribs and dried up bottoms, struggling in labored steps behind blown empty bellies. Most mothers there had long ceased to care, but not this one. She held a ghost smile between her teeth, in her eyes, the ghost of a mother's pride, as she combed the rust-colored hair left on his skull, and then, singing in her eyes, began carefully to part it. In another life, this would have been a daily act of no consequence before his breakfast in school. Now she did it like putting flowers on a tiny grave. Look at the beauty, look at the emotional appeal that the poet brings along. Because there is no child on this earth that does not understand the love of a mother. Now, here is she. No Madonna and child could touch that picture of a mother's tenderness for a son she soon would have to forget. Now, look at that picture. Half of it is Madonna holding her child, and the other has been given to you, or rather, I would say, has been very carefully replaced with a refugee mother and her child. Now, the air here is heavy with aura. There's an aura of disease, illness, death that surrounds the camp. And this is horrifying, lurking death over all of them, children being the first victims. That is, can there be a comparative between uh, this picture? Even the best of painters could never paint this and could never compare the actual look of real, genuine human tenderness that Achebe is looking at this mother who will probably lose this child and may not forget him. He says that she would soon have to forget. So soon have to forget as in terms of reality, because the child would not be there anymore. So why will this mother will have to forget her son? Because with the growing starvation in the refugee camp, she will have nothing to feed the child, and eventually he will wither away. But this reality does not deter the mother. She is offering him all tenderness, all the love that could possibly be given. So he's trying to draw a comparative analysis between a mother, Madonna, with her child, and also for you to understand that though both the pictures are standing testimonies of a mother's passion towards her child, but this cannot be compared. Why? Because here the air is heavy with odors of diarrhea of unwashed children. There is no water to wash them. There is no point in washing them because those dried out ribs, bottoms are struggling in labored steps behind blown empty bellies. There is so much of hunger, there's so much of devastation that has encountered these children, that there is disease, there is ailment, there is horrific pain of death and hunger that has somehow daunted on all these and has taken away every single iota of hope from them. And look at these particular words that the poet has tried to use here. The air is heavy with odors. The air is stinking of diarrhea because of unwashed children, dirty children whose ribs have been washed out. I mean, you can see the malnutrition children because their bones are sticking out, their bellies have protruded because of malnutrition. There are inflated stomachs, there are children dying every single day. Mothers are losing their children. You can see their skins beneath their ribs. So these unwashed children, this is like giving too much physical information for real, and that too into a poetic arrangement. Right? And look at the way the writer has not given any commas here, because he wants his readers to understand that this is not a poetic deliberation that he's offering. This is reality in our face. The air is heavy with odors of diarrhea of unwashed children with washed out ribs and dried up bottoms, struggling in labored steps behind blown empty bellies. The entire focal point is for the readers to understand that this is not a poetic line. This is reality offered to the world in a plain, simple, yet emphatic sentence. The only poetic genius that has been used here is that the poet has refrained from using any commas. And you must understand that these lines are important because these are giving you not just the example of one refugee camp, but many like these across the world, wherever children and mother are being put together in camps. And there will be other refugee camps, given the kind of socio-political and geographical conditions that we're suffering from. Recently, I believe I could say what is happening with Israel and Palestine could also be an example of the same. Now, moving on, it says most mothers there long ceased to care, but not this one. Look at her. She held a ghost smile between her teeth, and in her eyes, the ghost of a mother's pride as she combed the rust-colored hair left on his skull and then. Now, most mothers have long ceased to care. Now, this comes as an accusation to mothers. I mean, some of them are probably insensitive. I would not use that word because some of them have actually accepted reality. They know that their children are not going to survive. And however hard they may try, they will not be able to bring these children back to life. So they have stopped caring for their children. They do not wash them anymore. They do not comb them anymore. But this particular mother that Achebe wants us to focus on is actually like the epitome of all motherhood that can be offered on this earth, because mothers do not cease to care. They will struggle, they will battle out till the last moment. And here is she, with a ghost smile between her teeth. Look how the metaphors are changing. There is already a ghost smile between her teeth. In her eyes, the ghost of a mother's pride. She's still combing the rust-colored hair left on his skull. Now look at the words, ghost-like smile, right? A mother's pride into combing the rust-colored hair left on his skull. So repeatedly, the theme of starvation creeps in every line. And here is the mother holding on to a certain hope. And she held a ghost smile between her teeth. Why a ghost smile? It could be a ghost of a smile, perhaps, a ghost that something is already dead, a spirit of something that is already dead. And yet the mother is holding the ghost smile between her teeth. She's trying to smile, but the living smile is dead and gone. She's not smiling for real. She's smiling for her child, for him to understand that there could still be life. She's trying to smile. Now, this could be a comic hint on the fact that every time a mother smiles, a child smiles as well. So as long as she is smiling, there is hope in her child and he might survive as well. Now this ghost of a mother's pride, a mother's take too much pride in their children, in their upbringing of those children. And here is her doing no different. It's a mother's pride to look at her child, right? Her eyes are singing, though she's combing her son's hair and she knows that this child is going to die, but there is strength in her, there is hope in her, there is something in her that is pushing despair away. Now here is the poet giving voice to our faith in life, faith that is instilled in every mother the moment she becomes a mother. And then she inculcates the same hope, the same faith in her child, that come what may, I'm going to hold you for as long as possible. And with passing of time, I'll hold your back, but I'll never let you wither away. But here, this mother knows that he's going to wither away, but is still not giving up. Singing in her eyes, she's carefully parting with those hair. In another life, this would have been a little act of no consequence before his breakfast and school. And now she did it like putting flowers on that tiny grave. In another life, I mean, it could possibly mean a reincarnation or the next life, or he is possibly speaking to his readers that in another life, in a normal life, it would have been just another day, an act of no consequence. right? Mothers comb their children's hair every single day. I mean, for all the time that you've gone to school, at least in the primary section, your mothers did comb your hair. It was an act of no consequence before breakfast in school, because it was did in a way that it appeared something which is normal, something which is an act of no consequence. But here, this particular mother, taking and combing those hair from the skull is like an act of putting flowers on a tiny grave. The mother offering a homage to his child. And this could be plausible in her own world. Now, this entirety that is offered to us in Refugee Mother and Child comes together in these particular last two verses, because there are great many ways to interpret them, but unfortunately, all the ways are very sad in nature. And these verses highlight the harsh reality of the great many things that we take for granted in our world. I mean, how many of us thank our mothers for doing these acts of so-called no consequence before breakfast in school? We take it as their duty to offer breakfast to us, to comb our hair, to wash our bodies, to prepare us. But now when you draw a comparison, you can see how something as simple as combing the hair of a young child can be a daily ritual in any country, but can become equally symbolic to a mother decorating the grave of her child. Now, this analogy is frighteningly powerful and creates an image that is simply impossible to not to contemplate deeply, which is undoubtedly the intention of the poet and the words that he has chosen. Now, this was the poem, Refugee Mother and Child for You. Let's discuss the major themes that have been covered here. The first one and the primary one is the motherly love. Now, there's a proverb that says that love never gets lost. It's only kept. Now, this proverb means that love is a feeling that you can never get rid of. It will come back to you. It will haunt you, daunt you in certain ways. So here you have to understand that a mother's relationship with her child is the most spirited love one can ever experience. Even if the child will pass away, the mother will still love the child regardless of anything and everything. So it is the strongest love, no matter whatever the situation is. There's this umbilical cord that the child is tied to with his mother, and we say when a child is born, that cord is swivered away. But unfortunately, the cord of love never gets withered away. It stays, right? Like a painkiller. This love is like a painkiller. It will make the mother go through hell and yet come back with the most beautiful memories of her child. The second and the most significant theme that you have to understand here is the larger picture of human struggle. Right? Now, regardless of the family situation, we understand that the family has to be taken care of. Even if it is struggling, even if the next meal is not available, the family will always work hard or will always try to provide for the child. The poet is talking about how hungry the children are. They're struggling in labored steps behind blown empty bellies. This relates because when the person is starving, they try to survive. That is the first thing that they have to understand. And even if the family members are unable to offer them food, they will make sure that something or the other is offered to the child. So even in moments of great struggle, we find hope. And then there is this undying affection and confidence that one mother emphatically holds with her child. The poet demonstrates these pictures of starvation and destitution that displaced people are compelled to confront. The title of the poem emits underlying impression that even displaced people who have escaped to look for shelter, right? The evacuees, the youngsters, their families, whatever the struggle is, some human affinity or some human sympathy will always be there. So, you know, this poet is demonstrating these numerous parts of human disaster, yet deeply rooted into physical enduring. So this reflections upon the person as depth of the love for her child demonstrates qualities of strength, love, and hope through all desperate times. The poem is a great read that helps us open our eyes to people suffering from these third world countries. Chinua Achebe is an artist, revolutionary, and visionary who has given the world these articles and these poems and all these novels to understand the true suffering of his nation and other refugees around the world. This is Refugee Mother and Child for all of you. Thank you.